Odwołanie pierwszego prezesa Sądu Apelacyjnego w
The
Warszawie.
dismissal of the first president of the Court of Appeals in Warsaw, the national prosecutor, and now as many as 5 of the 10 ambassadors from foreign missions. Were all these decisions deliberately carried out bypassing the presidential palace and Polish President Andrzej Duda himself? How can the state be managed when we have a temporary acting chargé d'affaires and when there are no new appointees yet? Today, I am checking.
Nie ma jeszcze nowych zarządzających. Dzisiaj sprawdzam.
Wybory mają swoje
Elections have their consequences. I remind you that in Poland, according to Article 146 of the Constitution, foreign policy is conducted by the Council of Ministers. The risk that the presidential palace's approval will be bypassed is high for the dismissal of the 50 ambassadors announced by the foreign minister. For now, there are no specifics on the names of the ambassadors. However, the palace's position is clear. No Polish ambassador may be appointed or dismissed without the president's signature. We have already heard from the mouths of the president's associates that permission for the wholesale dismissal of ambassadors, just because they are appointed at such and at not such a time, cannot be given. Article 133 of the Polish Constitution, but also the Vienna Convention, speak in detail and emphasize the role of the president in the appointment of ambassadors who represent the policy of the state in the host country. And there the head of state is clearly exposed as the disposer and decider, always with the consent of the host. If the foreign ministry decides not to watch the president's decision, sends the president back to the country and appoints a chargé d'affaires, for example, the consequences could be severe. This is a rank downgrade. Other countries may also consider this case and say that we also withdraw our ambassadors in Poland. Despite the fact that the necessary opinion has not been issued by the president for the dismissal of the national prosecutor, Dariusz Barski, and the Minister of Justice is well aware of this, the decision has been made. The president has put forward the position that he will not issue his opinion due to the existing competence dispute. I believe that this competence dispute does not exist. Deputy national prosecutors and constitutionalists have a different opinion. The prosecutor who calls himself a national prosecutor, Mr. Dariusz Korneluk, today was appointed by the Prime Minister in a procedure unknown to the law because the position for national prosecutor is occupied. The opinion does not have to or support. There is no such requirement. The opinion may have content contrary to the position with the minister, while for formal reasons it must be issued, and if it is not issued, then the choice is flawed. Prosecutors from the National Prosecutor's Office do not have access to the building, and the first president of the Warsaw Court of Appeals, whose performance of functions was secured by a constitutional court order, no longer has access to the court system and official email. Any form of acceptance of behaviour of this content on my part as President of the Court of Appeals in Warsaw, and I would like to emphasise other representatives of the leadership of the Court of Appeals in Warsaw, would constitute acquiescence in criminal activity. Piotr Szab has filed a criminal complaint in this case. Must all officials appointed under the Law and Justice government lose their positions? We are open to discussions. I want to go back to work. I want to have specific responsibilities. I simply want to help with the case. The question is whether the good of the case is also at stake for those in power. Edyta Chudinska, Telewizja Republika. First an industrial dispute, then a strike. This is a scenario considered by trade unionists at the Turov mine and power plant. They are expected to make a decision on the matter within a few days. There is fear in the eyes of the workers. You can see. It's been talked about everywhere. Everyone is thinking what to do next here. This is the reaction to the decision of the Provincial Administrative Court in Warsaw, which overturned the environmental decision to continue lignite mining at the Turov mine. This means that Turov's operation after 2026 is in question. If this decision becomes law, we are facing a disaster, a catastrophe in many areas, an economic catastrophe, a social catastrophe, such a catastrophe from which we are unable to recover. People are generally shocked. I think the coming days will show how the region will react, while it will not look at it calmly. The mine, power plant and their subsidiaries employ nearly 5,000 people. But Turów is not only the largest employer in the region, but also one of the most important energy suppliers in the Polish energy system. The whole Green Deal, in my opinion, is subservient to this kind of terrorism. Really, Turów is the sort of the first instalment of what could happen in Poland if all these provisions that we are adopting at the moment in the European Parliament come into force. It will simply be a complete disaster. The Turów dispute has been continuing since 2021. The Czechs have alleged that the mine has caused groundwater levels in the border areas to drop. A European Court of Justice ordered the complex to close, despite Turov's huge investment in environmental protection. Let's remember that, in general, this CO2 emissions policy is conducted at an ideological level and in the interests of Germany, which is the Germany that wants to sell its so-called green, renewable energy technologies. The closure of Turov was not agreed to by the Law and Justice government. We are the guardians, the protectors of Polish mining, coal and lignite, and we will not allow the Polish mining industry to be shut down. Politicians of the then opposition, now part of the 13th December coalition, strongly demanded the closure of mines and power plants. Turov needs to be closed down. The only question is when it needs to be done. This is a court ruling and those in power must comply with it, no matter how painful and how difficult it is. This is what the European Union system is all about. The consequences of the possible closure of Turov will be felt by all Poles. Less electricity in the power system will mean an increase in electricity prices, imports from abroad, or restrictions on power supply. The government, and to some extent the court sympathetic to it, here represent more the vision of Brussels and not the vision of the Polish national interest. This is a sure signal also to the voters of Bogatynia and the surrounding areas, who mostly supported the civic platform and the current ruling coalition, and unfortunately they are reaping the harvest of this. The Turov mine and power plant complex currently supplies 8% of Poland's electricity and heating needs.
TikTok is a threat to our national security because it is owned by ByteDance, which does the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. We know this because ByteDance leadership says so and because Chinese law requires it. This bill therefore forces TikTok to break up with the Chinese Communist Party. It does not apply to American companies. It only applies to companies subject to the control of foreign adversaries defined by Congress.
The United States House of Representatives has passed a bill that forces the Chinese owner of TikTok to sell its shares, so that the platform is not controlled by the Chinese state. Otherwise, the platform will be blocked in the United States. TikTok's chief executive officer says the platform is actively used by more than 170 million Americans, including 5 million United States businesses, to earn a living, engage and build communities. And the closure of TikTok could result in the loss of 300,000 jobs in the United States.
Over the last few years, we have invested to keep your data safe and our platform free from outside manipulation. We have committed that we will continue to do so. This legislation, if signed into law, will lead to a ban of TikTok in the United States.
The bill is a response to national security concerns. There is a serious threat of surveillance of citizens, interference in US politics, and concern that data from many electronic devices is being sent to Beijing. The bill will now go to the Senate, where its fate is uncertain. The head of TikTok intends to visit Congress to openly discuss the issue with senators. The European Union moved closer to adopting the world's first artificial intelligence rules on Wednesday, as EU lawmakers endorsed a provisional agreement for a technology whose use is rapidly growing across a wide swathe of industries and in everyday life.
Vote is closed. And it is adopted. Congratulations on this seminal work.
The legislation, called the AI Act, will regulate foundation models or generative AI such as Microsoft-backed OpenAI that are trained on large volumes of data to generate new content and even to perform tasks. It will restrict governments' use of real-time biometric surveillance in public spaces to cases of certain crimes, prevention of genuine threats such as terrorist attacks, and searches for people suspected of the most serious crimes. The rules will cover high-impact general-purpose AI models and high-risk AI systems, which will have to comply with specific transparency obligations and European Union copyright laws. A total of 523 EU lawmakers voted in favour of the deal, while 46 were against and 49 abstained. EU countries are set to give their formal nod to the deal in May, with the legislation expected to enter into force early next year and apply in 2026, although some of the provisions will take effect earlier. Elon Musk's SpaceX company has launched the Starship rocket into space for the third time. The first two attempts ended in total failure, but the data collected at the time helped to improve today's flight. The third flight of the Starship involved the launch of both stages of the vehicle, the booster and the spacecraft itself. The booster disconnected in space and began its return to Earth. At the moment of disconnection, the Starship started its own engines for the first time in extraterrestrial space. A landing in the Indian Ocean was planned for the next phase. However, representatives relayed at the end of the transmission that contact had been lost with the rocket after it re-entered Earth's atmosphere and the launch was unsuccessful. So far, 2 test flights have been conducted. Both ended in explosions. Starship is not only expected to carry the largest payloads into orbit and significantly reduce the cost of such transportation, but it is also expected to make a key contribution to the colonization of the Moon. The entire Starship system measures 120 meters in height, and its payload capacity for flight to the low Earth orbit is 150 tons. If the Starship begins regular operation, it has the potential to revolutionize space flight.